Hi there, Booktube. It's Ros. It's the very end of June now, and so this is a whistle-stop tour through my reading plans for July. Now, July is always a favourite reading month for me because of Jane Austen July, and that's an event that I always throw myself into wholeheartedly. And I'll come to my Jane Austen July plans in the second part of this video. But thank you, Katie and Marissa and Claudia, for making it happen again for us. There's a couple of other reading events that I'm allowing to shape my reading a bit this month, and I'll talk about them as I kind of work through first chunk of my plans. I am taking part in a sort of long, slow read of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales with Jo, aka Too Tight the Trek, and this month it's The Physician's Tale, so I'm looking forward to that. And Aurora, Leigh by Elisabeth Barrett Browning, I'm reading a section of that every month along with a couple of people including Kate Howe, kind of working towards finishing it in Victober, so both of those have got to happen this month. My Jen the Librarian and Greg of Supposedly Fun are sort of leading a bit of an EM Forster read-along, and each every 2 months we're reading another of his novels in the order that they were published, and this month it's Howard's End. Now, I'm very happy about this because, now this will sound a bit ridiculous, but I'm genuinely not sure if I've read Howard's End before. How could that be, you ask? How could that be? Because I read a whole load of things in my sort of late teens and early 20s, classics, and that I didn't keep a record of the time. And now I think, oh, that sounds familiar. But then it could be familiar because I've watched a film or TV adaptation of, and it's a really well-known book. So it is only when I get a bit into this that I will be sure whether it's a read or a reread. Bananas, but there you go. But I am looking forward to it. Now, my real life book group has picked a book that I'm quite pleased about this month, and that's The Madwoman's Ball by Victoria Mass. It's translated from the French by Frank Wynne. He's a translator that I like. I read, what did I read last year? The Art of Losing by Alice Zeniter, translated by him, and it was a good translation. So that I'm looking forward to. France also happens to be one of the countries taking part in the Women's World Cup, so that's kind of handy. A bit of a connection there. I'm going to read, as ever, a book by an author from a country where I've never read a writer from that country before. And this month, that's going to be Costa Rica. And I plumped for that this month because it's another of the teams that's taking part in the Women's World Cup, which sort of links in with that readathon that I'm helping host. And but also, it's a graphic novel, and I'm trying to read something graphic, a comic, each month if I can this year. And that is Ido Brenes' Memoirs of Límon, and it's sort of about someone rediscovering their family history in Costa Rica. So that's the sort of first batch of plans. Then, yes, Women's World Cup Readathon. If you haven't heard of this, I'm sure you have. It's an event where people get a team that's in the championship, in the event, and read something by that country of that team, and then when they lose, read the people that beat them. And it's a fun event. It starts towards the end of July. I'm hosting it with Alice of Alice's Giant Bookshelf, Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and Mark of Booktime of Elvis, whose idea these sort of football tournament related readathons, he started it, and great fun it is. And we've got a wonderful group of people in a Discord group doing it, and it's still not too late to join. So I will leave an announcement, link to the announcement video below, so you can pick on that if you wanted to. So my actual initial team for that is Portugal. And the Portuguese women's football team is not very good. So I had better get on and read my Portuguese choice, which is The Migrant Painter of Birds by Lydia George, translated by Margaret Costa. Such a good translator, I really rate her. Because I think that they will probably lose to the Netherlands on the 23rd of July, and I'll already be on to having to read other countries, so we'll see. I also, in my group, the group that Portugal's in for the tournament is Vietnam. And for Vietnam, I've been really looking forward to reading Wandering Souls by Cecile Pan. It was on the shortlist for the Women's Prize. I've heard so many people enthuse about it, say they wish it had won or, recommend it. So it's a golden opportunity. Even if Vietnam don't beat Portugal, I'm still going to read that. For the Netherlands, I'm going to take the opportunity to start reading some things from a book of short stories that I have. Now, I'm not a fan of short stories, as you may have gathered. I tend to say it at regular intervals, don't I? But I have a lovely collection, curiously enough, selected by the translator Frank Wynne, who translated the French book I'm reading this month. And it's called, Found in Translation, 100 of the finest short stories ever translated. So I'm going to pick stories out of that link to teams in the Women's World Cup, and starting with the Netherlands. And I know there's at least 2 in there that are from Dutch authors, so that's cool. The other team in my group is from the USA, and they're most likely, I think, to win the group. Fortunately, Portugal doesn't play them until the 1st of August. So I know that I'm going to be reading an American book in August, because it's Faulkner in August that I'm helping to host, and we're going to be reading Absalom. So I've got that one covered. Hoorah. The other Booktube event that I'm going to take part in this month, I'll just dip into, is Booktube at War. New idea. Michael J. Vaughan, I think, started it, and he's now got a bunch of co-hosts. And for that, Wandering Souls will be one book that I read for that, because it's the kind of aftermath of the Vietnam War. And then I'm also going to take it as an opportunity to reread something I haven't read since I was definitely in my early teens, and that's The Snow Goose by Paul Gallico. It's a novella or even a short story, I suppose, that's set in the time of the Second World War, or just before and then during, and links to Dunkirk. It's very lovely, and I will talk about it when I've read it. So that could be everything that isn't Jane Austen July, I think. So what are my Jane Austen July plans? Well, as I say, I always throw myself into this with energy. And prompt number 1 always is to read one of the 6 main Austen novels. And I kind of rotate through them over each year. And this year it is the turn of Pride and Prejudice. Now, this is when I produce my original sort of paperback copy of Pride and Prejudice that I had as a teenager, which is so well read it is completely falling to pieces, and I can't actually read this copy anymore, but I keep it for sentimental reasons. But I have a nice new Folio Society. It's not new, it's new to me, Folio Society edition, which I can read. Look at that, it's got a nice woodcut at the front of Elisabeth and Darcy. The thing about rereading Pride and Prejudice is it is one of the few books that I have reread multiple times in my life, and the joy of that is as I read it, I get this kind of joyous recognition of scenes and conversations and bits of dialogue that it's a different experience. And as someone who's not a great rereader, it's a novelty and a pleasure. So prompt number 2 is to read something from Jane Austen's minor works. And what I'm doing now I've read all the major minor works, if you know what I mean, is each year I read a bit more of Jane Austen's letters. You wouldn't want to read, these are the complete letters, you wouldn't want to read sort of all of them all in one go, if you know what I mean, but very enjoyable to dip into. And a bit more of her juvenilia. And the juvenilia is actually the group read for the second half of the month, but I think I may just sort of dip in rather than read loads of it. We'll see. That's prompt 1 and 2. Prompt number 3 is to read some non-fiction associated with Jane Austen or her times. And this, the last few years, I've sort of read literary criticism or sort of tangential, stuff like Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. That's a good one, where it looks at sort of her life through her houses. Jane Austen, A Life in Objects by Paula Bernhardt. That was good. But this year I'm going to read really like a straight biography, and that's Claire Tomalin's Jane Austen, A Life, which is almost like it's one of the standard biographies of Jane Austen, and I think it would be good to take a more sort of linear approach this year for a change. If I have time, I might also read The Genius of Jane Austen, which is about her love of the theatre, but no promises on that one. Prompt number 4 is a retelling of a Jane Austen book or historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. Now, if you have followed this channel, and who should have done, but you might have done, you will know that I forswore ever reading another Jane Austen novel retelling a couple of years ago, because I just decided they're always unsatisfactory. They never make me happy. Now, some people really helpfully responded to that by suggesting that rather than reading a retelling sort of in her period, to try one from a different culture, moving the story to a different culture or something, and maybe I will try that next year. But this year I happily can read Godmersham Park by Jill Hornby. Now I read her book Miss Austen about Jane Austen's sister Cassandra last year, and Godmersham Park is a place that Jane Austen stayed, and she became friends with the governess there. And this is sort of so it's a sort of a story where Jane features as a character rather than a retelling of one of her books. So fingers crossed that one will work. Prompt number 5 is to read one of Jane's contemporaries, and this year I'm going to dip into some poetry and read some Keats. This is a selected edition of his poetry, and I always quite enjoy bringing a bit of poetry into my Jane Austen, and I know it was something that she enjoyed reading herself. So that's all the definite prompts that I'm going to follow. There's a couple of like watch things prompts that I'm a bit take it or leave it with those, to be honest. But the group read for the first half of the month is Northanger Abbey, and Tilly and I have a bit of a plan to enjoy that the Northanger Abbey experience in various ways, which will become clear when we get into July. Okay, but I may well also end up rereading, or at least dipping in and out of, Northanger Abbey too. There we go. That's my July plans. Loads of stuff, but all quite doable, I think, and hope. And I would love to hear about your July plans.